Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm Bob Thomas, Superintendent of Knox County Schools, and this is our Disparities in Education Outcome Community Meeting, and appreciate you showing up. I know we've got members of our steering committee here, and thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank Principal Rob Spees for allowing us to use Fulton High School this evening, so I want to be sure and thank him. And I also want to introduce board members that are here. We have Mrs. Jennifer Owens here. Jennifer, thank you for being here representing 2nd District. So we appreciate Ms. Owen being here. Also, we've got some staff from Central Office here to assist with presentations this evening. And also one of our principals who's doing, Mr. Andrew Brown, doing a great job with restorative practices and PBIS, the implementation there. So you'll be hearing from some of our people. I'd just like to say thank you to the steering committee. We've done some great work over the last year, I feel like. Has it been enough? No, it hasn't been enough. So we need to try to step it up for the coming year, and part of the problem might have been me being sort of new to this role, although not new to Knox County. So we're going to do our best to put our foot on the gas pedal and throttle up this next year. A couple of things that I think have been real beneficial for us is our training the folks have received in restorative practices. We're experiencing success there, also with PBIS, and I know I said earlier, Mr. Brown's here to talk about some of those things at South Oil Middle School, but happened to be interviewing a couple of our principal applicants this morning, existing principals who have applied for some other jobs, and what came up in the interview was very positive, what I was hearing in terms of the implementation of both PBIS and restorative practices. I know one of our smaller elementary schools had 20 suspensions last year, and I was told today that's 5. So I'm thinking, wow, that's great progress, and we're seeing that, I think, across the district. And I won't talk too much about that because Ms. Massey and her folks and Mr. Rutter here from Research Department will be talking about that. So anyway, just good positive feedback for me when I start hearing it from our folks who are doing the implementation. So again, I'm pleased that we're making progress. I'm not pleased that we haven't made more progress. So, and we talk a little bit about that when we have our steering committee meetings. And again, like I say, we'll try to put our foot on the accelerator and move a little bit faster this coming year. So I know you're here to give us feedback. We want to sort of share with you what we've done and the results we've received and gotten, and we also want to hear from you. So I'll get out of the way and let our co-chairs, Jared Kroom and Andre Conti, take over at this point, and then we'll move the program forward. So again, thank you for being here this evening, and look forward to your feedback after we have the sessions a little bit later this evening. So thank you.
All right, appreciate that, Bob. Again, like to extend, the welcome to everybody. I know people are split. There's a city council budget vote today, too, so a lot of stuff's going on today, but glad you all are here. So, yeah, we're here to do some work. We're going to look at some slides about the progress that we have achieved over the last year, and hopefully provide you all not only information, but a voice for you to provide feedback. We've been at this for a while. There was a task force that spent a year and a half researching disparities around like 2015, and a lot of that was birthed from the community. People saw an issue and people wanted to tackle it. So they came with recommendations, which was voted on by the board in 2016. So after that, the task force transitioned into a steering committee by, at the time, the interim superintendent Buzz Thomas. And a lot of these people that's on the current steering committee was on the current task force, was on the previous task force. So again, like Bob said, we made some progress, but, we want to be as perfect as possible, given the times that we're in. And we want to make sure that not only you all get the right information, but again, your feedback is critical. It's essential. You people are living it, you're seeing it. Your parents, teachers, everybody that's involved with these issues have a say-so. And all of these voices are valuable. And again, we got 2 hours, and you'll be talking to each other. And after a while, I'll be asking some questions, so hopefully get some good feedback and some good energy. I don't know if you got anything else to say, or you're good? All right, cool.
I feel like a talent show or something. I don't really have any talent, but I'll do it anyway. I just kind of wanted to leave us as co-chairs. We've been at this since sort of the beginning of the actual steering committee. One of the things I really want to share with the public is that although this is, we are citizens. I'm a parent of a child at Austin East High School, and Andre is very active in the community. The superintendent has us as co-chairs, and I just really want us to understand this is a cooperative thing. This is not an adversarial thing, because we all want the same thing. Now, we all have ideas on how we get to where we want to be, but ultimately everyone wants a stronger, a healthier, a more robust Knox County schools. So I want us to come in with that mentality. How can we serve the students of Knox County? And I think if we start with that, we can only end with making Knox County schools better. Thank you.
All right, appreciate that. So now to the show, I'm going to introduce Missy Massey, who is Executive Director of Student Support Services.
Thank you. Oh, you're very kind. So I want to say how very excited I am to see everybody today. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what our plan is. We have some data to share with you. We do a pretty, and I say we, really, it's Steve Rudder and his team, but we do a really intensive data review regularly and share that information with schools. And we're going to update you on where we are on several of the initiatives. So that'll be probably the first 30 minutes. We have some guests that are going to speak tonight that we've asked some people who are doing the work, not just those of us who are kind of managing the work. We've asked some people that are doing the work to be here tonight to kind of share with you so that you have some information directly from the people there. And then we're going to do some breakout sessions where what Mr. Thomas said and then what Jared and Andre said is we really want to hear from you and where we, have you seen any of these improvements that we're talking about? Let me be very clear. We know we still have a lot of work to do, and that's just being very transparent and honest, and we're still working on getting schools trained, so we still have some work to do, but we know we've made progress, and so we want to celebrate that progress, but we also want to be real sure in our commitment to you that the work is going to continue. And speaking of data, I'm going to introduce Mr. Stephen Rudder, who is going to talk about what our suspension results and all of our different things look like this year.
I'll click. Okay. Manage the click. Yeah. I like to control my own clicking. Okay, so I always like to start out these things by providing a little bit of context. So these 3 bars represent the composition of the student body of Knox County Schools for each of the last 3 years. And so what you can see by this is really the only wedge of this these bars that are growing is this gray wedge. So that's the part of this graph that represents the Hispanic subgroup. And so what that means is that the Hispanic subgroup in Knox County Schools is growing at a faster rate than any of the others. So it's kind of, as a proportion, is displacing some of the other groups. So jumping right into suspensions, it might be a little tough to see. So what I have here is the total number of suspensions for each of the last 3 years, and the 3 bars on the left are for elementary schools, the 3 bars in the middle are high schools, and the 3 bars on the right-hand side are for middle schools. And so you can see for each of the 3 grade levels that the trend has been decreasing over the last couple of years. And so especially at the middle and high school levels, I think the high school drop between last year and this year, we have 46% fewer suspensions. That includes in-school and out-of-school suspensions. They're pooled together in this graph. And then for the middle schools, it's about 47% fewer than the year prior. So if we split that apart into the top of suspension, then so on the left-hand side, we have the in-school suspensions shown. So you can see each of the last 3 years, we've decreased the in-school suspension. There was a very large decrease last year to this year. A lot of that has to do with the restorative intervention that we're doing across the district. And then on the right-hand side, we're looking at out-of-school suspensions. And so just so you know, on this graph, what we're doing is we're counting disciplinary incidents that result in a suspension, right? So on the right-hand side, it's more of a steady decrease over the last 3 years. So from, okay.
The first graph, was it, were we going this way? Yeah.
Is this kind of?
On the right side is 2015, and we're going to the left?
This is, the gray bar is for 2015, that's 2016, and this is 2017. That's for elementary schools, right? So I'm sorry, it's hard to see all the way up there. The middle part is for high schools, and the right-hand side is for middle schools.
What shows us that they've gone down?
The length of the bars. So the bars have gotten shorter, right? Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. Yeah, this is everybody pulled together. Yeah, I apologize. Does anybody have any more questions before I move along? Okay. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm totally okay with that. And so this one is just disaggregating it by the kind of suspension, right? So the bars on the left in this graph are for in-school suspension, and the 3 bars on the right hand are for out of school. So this is SY 15-16, and that's 16-17, and that's this year. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so for in-school suspension, we had, last school year, we had 11,714 in-school suspension incidents. This year we had 4,000, right at 4,000. So in-school suspension is where the kid is removed from the classroom and put into, I don't know how you say that, a different environment? Yeah, special classroom, yeah. Out-of-school suspension is where they're removed from attendance of the school for some period of time. Sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's more than that, depending on what they've done. Okay. All right, so this one, now we're moving on to, this is a little bit different than what we had on the last slides. This is a count of students, right, that have at least one in-school suspension recorded to their name. Does that make sense? You see the difference between incidents and students? So on this graph, you can see that for in-school suspension, because of the restorative intervention that we've engaged in this year, it's down in every single subgroup, like across the right-hand side. We've had decreases across the board there. So just so you know, the reason why this is a different color is because the definition of economically disadvantaged changed this year, right? So Tennessee Department of Education defines who is considered economically disadvantaged, and it's a very different definition. So I grade that out because it's almost like a new baseline this year, because we're really talking about a different group of students than we were last year. Does that make sense? Yes?
So in this table, you include 17, 18, but it was not included in the other ones before, right?
Yeah. Yes, they were on there. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All of these are for the last 3 years. Yeah. Yeah, it's so up until this year, it was we collected information through household surveys and through our food service departments about like free and reduced lunch and things like that. So that's a U.S. Department of Agricultural function. So we would get information from that, in addition to information from like the health department and other federal programs that people qualify for, and it was all put together. So, and then this year, it's only those federal programs that people qualify, like SNAP, like, those kinds of things. So the effect of that for Knox County schools was that the number of students that were considered economically disadvantaged was cut roughly in half. Right, we went from 45% last year to 24% this year. Huh? It makes it challenging for me as to be in data. So because you're really just redefining the group at that point, right? So it's a really different group than it was the year before. So I don't know. I don't know if it's federal or state, but it's one of the two. Like they tell us how to do it. No, because it happened across the state. So it basically, the same thing happened to every other school district across the state.
Is it connected to your funding?
Probably. I would imagine so. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so I got the same sort of chart for out-of-school suspensions, right? So we saw decreases again in most subgroups, and most notably our African-American students and white students. So there were some small increases in some of the other subgroups. So even though that the number of students that have a suspension, Hispanic students that have a suspension increased a little bit, it actually, when I dug a little bit deeper, what we saw was the percentage of Hispanic students in Knox County schools that have out-of-school suspension decreased. So what that means is the population of that subgroup is growing faster than we're assigning them out-of-school suspension. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Can you relate the OSS to those that go into the juvenile system?
The schools that go into the juveniles?
Students that get out of school and put in the juvenile system. Relate that to OSS?
Maybe. I'm not sure how. I can investigate that for sure. Yeah, right. Okay. So one of the things that we look at and we've looked at since the beginning of this committee was we call it the representation index. So to make a long story short with this one is any group that has a representation index of greater than 1 is overrepresented in the discipline data. Anyone that's has a representation index of 1 is exactly what we would expect to see, and then less, that group is underrepresented. So we've got 3 groups here that we have overrepresentation in school suspensions. One of them is African American, one's economically disadvantaged, again, and students with disabilities. All right, and so there hasn't been a lot of change like in those 3 groups across the 3 years. English language learner. Yeah.
I have a silly question. We're not finished with the year 17, 18, so what are we looking at here? Is this February data?
No, it's right now. It's like a couple days ago. I queried the database. So it might change, the numbers might change a little bit, but they won't change a lot. Yes. I think yes, yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, so the way that's calculated is, and it's kind of a common way of looking at disparities when you look at research, this kind of research. You take the pool of kids who have in-school suspensions, and then you figure out what the composition by subgroup is. So, like for example, if all the kids who have an in-school suspension, like 30% of them are white, then you divide that by the percentage in the population, the overall enrollment of the schools. Right, so if the overall population of that group, like my example, if it was 15%, 30 divided by 15 is 2. And we would expect to see about 15% of the kids with that. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes?
It's another dumb question, but it's not a dumb question. So we have, I see where the black students have ISS, and we've got the economic disadvantage, the students with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the Hispanic.
Yeah, there's over.
Are they the same?
There's definitely overlap between these groups. Yeah.
And so in that case, how are you having the numbers to have the kids either ED and SWD when
They'd be both. They'd be included in both of those bars. Yeah.
do you have those numbers categorized?
Yes, we have them. I don't think I've split it out like that Like what you're talking about is ED and ELL and that whatever. Yeah. And the last slide I had, well, the next to last slide. So this is similar. This is for out of school, and it's a real similar story to the last one, right? So we still have overrepresentation in our black subgroup, our ED, and students with disabilities. And then, so this is the data we get from our law enforcement agencies. And so really the story here is the difference between last year. This middle part of the graph is last year's data. This is this year's data. So we had a couple fewer arrests this year than we did last year. We had fewer African American students arrested, fewer white students, and then we had more reported as mixed race. So I don't quite know what that means, but that's the way we get it from them.
So there's a number at the top of my eyes, I can't tell.
Yeah.
It's like 46 for this year.
Whoops, I'm sorry. Yes, hold on just a second. I'll go to that.
Total of 90 for this year, 92 last year was the total.
Yeah.
The year before that it was 110 for the school year 15-16, 92 for 16-17, and 90 for 17-18, which is this current school year.
Yeah.
So we've seen a bit of a decrease. I will remind you that when students are arrested on campus, it's generally for, not generally, it is for serious offenses. And back to the question about how does that relate to an in-school suspension, I won't say that every time, but if it's something that happens on campus that's significant enough to result in an arrest, there is a possibility that a suspension also happens.
And I would also say, because we have this at our school, it's not necessarily an event that happens in school. My KPD officer has been charged by the DA. There have been students who've had incidents over the weekend, and they will come in on Monday and investigate.
Yep. Yes, sir. That's the sum total of this school year for this year, so of all of the groups. Yes, sir. Well, it's it's 6 columns. 44 Caucasian students, 20, either 28 or 29, my old eyes can't see that. African American students, mixed race 11, 3 other, 3 unknown, and 1 Hispanic. And unknown, the kids report, the kids self-report, or their parents, so that's where that data comes from the DA's office. I mean, I'm sorry, from juvenile court. It is not. We could break that data down. We have that. I mean, we just didn't do it in this chart. But, so, yeah. All right, you ready? Yeah. Okay. So, oh, no, that data summary. So I guess I want to just kind of recap a couple of things that he said. When we look at our data, we are seeing decreases across the board in the total overall numbers of suspensions. If you remember, well, some of you may or may not, but if you go back and you look at our data, the year that we did the disparities task force, when we looked at our data by school, students with disabilities, our students of color had in some schools, 2 times the possibility, up to 4 times the possibility of being suspended at a rate higher than their Caucasian counterparts. When we look at our data now, across the board, it looks like it's about, and I'm going to look at my numbers, got to say it's about 2 times more likely as on average for our district. Still not acceptable, and we're still working on that, but definitely an improvement from where we were before. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the major initiatives. If for those of you who are not familiar, if you go to our DEO website, you will, which by the way, we will post these slides on our DEO website so that if you want to know where your reference point is to find that. If you go to the DEO website, you'll see the recommendations from the task force. Part of what we do with the steering committee is we review all of those recommendations and we kind of give a progress report when we meet with them about where we are. So we're going to highlight some of those major initiatives for you today, and I'm going to start with our ombudsman. And for those of you who don't know Ms. Tammy Campbell and Ms. Sue Owenby, they are the people that work with our families when there are concerns. So I'm going to turn that over to her, and she's going to just share a little bit about her work. Their work, sorry.
Their work. Come on, Sue. I'm Tammy Campbell, and I'm the ombudsman for the school district, and Sue Owenby is our ombudsman for students that are receiving special education services. So we work together on a lot of concerns that are brought before us, and our primary role for the Office of the Ombudsman is to serve as a resource for employees, for parents, students, And we hear concerns. We work together collaboratively with whatever agency or I should say department or person is involved to work through resolving their issue through mediation and often education. We also identify other school system services that could use improvement. We take in the feedback that we receive both through survey, phone calls, emails, face-to-face contact that can help improve processes for stakeholders across our district. And so I'm going to let Sue also talk about a little bit about some of the things that we've handled this year over the different inquiries. I will say to date that we've probably handled a little over 160 inquiries, and inquiries can range from a phone call to know who do I need to call to get this to get my transfer approved. It could be more serious, hey, I don't understand my IEP. It could be, I have a concern around a disciplinary action that was taken with my child and I need assistance working with the school to get it dealt with. So it ranges. All inquiries that we hold are confidential, other than if it's going to bring self-harm or harm to others. We do have to report that, which is the law. But other than that, we definitely look to listen and definitely hear what needs to happen and try to work towards making that happen. So I'll let Sue share, and then we're going to have a special person that has utilized our services, one of our parents who has graciously offered to share with you her experience with the Ombudsman Office.
As Tammy mentioned, we do a lot of different kinds of things. We do everything from helping parents understand questions with transportation. Sometimes we do go to IEP meetings, help parents understand that process. We do some parent trainings as well. We actually just recently did a couple for parents to understand the IEP process, which is the individual education process when they're going in through special education with their children. We also do a lot of connecting families to resources. Sometimes it's things in the community. We do a lot of different kinds of things, so it's always, different from day to day.
So I would like to introduce to you, there are some others in the room that have also utilized the Ombudsman Office, but Miss Tiffany Kyle, who is a parent actually of a student here at Fulton. She's going to kind of share, and I'm going to take the baby for a second so she can talk. And if there are others that would like to share or share with Miss Massey or others your experience, they are definitely, and the superintendent, they would definitely like to hear, I'm sure, your experience with our office.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Tiffany Kyle. I am a parent of 3 children. One just graduated, praise God. And he was special ed, so I've dealt with the Ombudsman's office in different areas. Then I have one that attends here now, and then I have one that goes to Fair Garden Preschool. There have been lots of opportunities to utilize the services, and I would recommend anybody that's a parent in Knox County to find out about the Ombudsman's office to see how they can help them, whether it's with connections to things that are going on in your school or with the new restorative intervention program. It's a good resource for parents to be able to know if you have concerns or need connections or need to find out different things. This is the office that you need to call that kind of keeps it, I don't want to say like a mediation, but really, she can be. Tammy has actually gone with me to a meeting, and very, very thorough. She takes really good notes, and she makes sure and follows up on everything that needs to be followed up on. Very open and does her very best. I really appreciate that, and really knows a lot of resources. And that's a really big important thing here. If you're not well connected, my motto is there's nothing worse than knowing that you need help and not knowing where to find it. So to be able to have this office, to be able to come in and kind of safeguard you to make sure that everybody is on the same field, playing field, it's level. When you're in a meeting, to be a parent and to go into a meeting and there's 13 people and you're not prepared for that, to have somebody to be able to come in and be with you and say, okay, this is this, wait a minute, we need to go back and revisit this, because when you're When it's your kid, it's a whole nother thing. I have all this wonderful training to be able to support other parents, but when it comes to it being my kid that's going through something, I'm a parent. So all that stuff goes out the window. So to be able to have somebody from this office come and say, okay, we need to revisit this. Is this what you wanted to happen? Is this all right with you? Those type of things is really, really beneficial. Sorry, she's 2. And he's 4. So just the things that she's heading up and the way that it's coming together, for me this year has probably been one of the most productive school years. And like I said, my oldest just graduated Saturday. So I really wish this would have been in place earlier on with the IEPs and things like that. Somebody I could just call and reach out to and say, okay, who do I talk to? Do I need to call Miss Massey? Because I will. And, you know, or is there some other steps that I need to take? Or, you know, for her to say, okay, Tiffany, come back, and we're going to start down here and go up. Because, again, as a parent, you want things to be done. That's my kid, and what do we need to do to bring that back around? And then working in Knox County, I have had the opportunity to share, hey, you know, that's out of my pay grade, but there's a lady you can call, and she might be able to help you with resources and things like that. So I encourage everyone and anybody that's staff, Knox County staff, to let their parents know this service is available and it's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I owe the kids treats because they did good. The last thing I just want to share, and I'll definitely turn this over so we can move forward. This year we also implemented, or we restructured the Family Advisory Council for our district, and we did have close to 40 parents representing all 9 school districts across our county to participate in 6 monthly meetings to really help us provide more input for family involvement, as well as to help shape policy and improve practices that we have across our district to engage families. The policy this year also, the Ombudsman Office or the Ombudsman role was added to the B171 school board policy for complaints and appeals to the board that took place in April of 2018. And I have also been very involved with the work for cultural competency, which leads us to our next item. Really proud of that work, really proud of what our schools are doing and stepping up to, and the awarenesses that we're all learning about ourselves and how to be more culturally responsive to our population of students and families. So, Ms. Massey.
So we have a contract with the University of Tennessee, the College of Teaching and Learning. They were the people who got the bid in the RFP process, which is the request for proposals. That contract was on our school board agenda second semester, so we started our first training in February, and we did one in March as well. So we have 13 schools that have participated in the phase 1. Let me say, cultural competency training is something that we will continue to engage in moving forward, but the first baseline level, and Tammy referred to a couple of the topics that they cover, we have 13 schools, and we have all of our remaining 92 schools scheduled for next year. I asked Mr. Andrew Brown, who is principal at South Dole Middle, and he was in our first cultural competency class, to come and just talk to you about what the impact was, what he saw, what the impact was for his staff, and then he has a lot of follow-up activities that he's been doing with his staff and has graciously shared, and we've been sharing those with other principals as well. Again, Mr. Brown.
Thank you all. I guess I look at cultural competency as just the next step or another piece of what we're trying to do to eliminate disparities. I have only, as I looked at that data, you know, that gives me some hope that things are changing. It's not up there anymore. I thought you were looking, I'm sorry. But as Ms. Massey said, we're not there yet. We start at my school, I've only been there for 2 years, and when I came in, the most important thing for me, and I'm probably going to get way into somebody else's presentation, so I'm going to try not to say a whole lot, because I see Mr. Wright over here, who's the expert on some of these things coming up. But it all starts with when a kid walks in your building, they have to know what you expect. One of the things in a lot of the materials I've read have to do with, just with expectations in schools in general, if you think historically about schools, schools are places that are dominated by white females. I mean, the majority of teachers, if you look, are white females. And so by nature, we set them up for white females to be successful, whether we mean to or not. And that's where cultural competency was so important, because that's not intentional, but we all have implicit bias. I don't know what it's like to be a black female. You know, that's one of the things we talked about. I don't know what it's like to be female in general. And there's probably some really good things, like I don't know what it's like to give birth. And I don't want to know what it's like to give birth. And I admire you for the work that you have done to bring the rest of us into this world. But I don't know. But because I know a little bit about it, then I can know that I can be empathetic about that. And that's kind of, to me, the importance of cultural competency. I am a white man, and I'm always going to be a white man. But that doesn't mean that I can't understand the things that other people have gone through and the stories. And that's kind of where it is for me. Everybody walks into our school buildings with a story. And it's our job to find out what that story is, because that story is going to impact everything that happens in that child's day. Even as a teacher or as a principal, I walk in the morning and, you know, I may have had a bad day or somebody cut me off in traffic. That impacts what happens to me and maybe the interactions that I have with people at school. Well, imagine now a child that comes in and because of their socioeconomic status didn't have breakfast that morning, may not even had dinner the night before. That's going to impact how they behave the next day. So when Miss Massey called me and said, would you be willing to be one of the first to go through, I think she does that because she knows that by nature I must be a guinea pig, because I'm willing to do those things. Like I said, when we started 2 years ago, one of my first priorities was to make sure that we were implementing the positive behavior systems with fidelity, because that revolves around setting clear expectations at your school and being able to say to kids, all right, when you come to school, here's what we expect. And when you're in the cafeteria, here's what we expect. And when you're in the hallways, here's what we expect. And so kids know what it is you expect. The next step of that is then moving to okay, so what happens when you don't meet those expectations? And then that's when we get into restorative practices. Let's talk about what the behavior was, and let's get to the root of that behavior. And let's don't just jump to being punitive. Let's find out the reason that something happened, and then let's fix that. You know, let's get to the bottom, and let's have a conversation, and let's invoke empathy between two people. And again, sometimes it's hard to invoke empathy if you don't know that kid's story and if they don't know your story. And so then you can come into the situation and you add the next piece, which is cultural competency, and that really allows you as a person to understand the diversity and the differences between people that you interact with on a daily basis. So we went through this in February, and it was very eye-opening, because a lot of people, you know, I saw as I looked around the room during our training that aha moment when their eyes just got big, realizing I don't mean to do things a certain way, or I don't mean to set things up in my classroom to where it singles people out. You know, I don't want to call someone out. We also learned a lot just about historically about why things, you know, about oral tradition and about why oral tradition is so important in certain communities. And so it was a good, just a very good exercise for our teachers. Is it the magic bullet, and have we arrived? Absolutely not. I think it's a great first step. I think it's a good thing to open up conversation and to enable us as a staff to sit down and talk about our practices and talk about the way we do things and talk about the way we set things up and in the organization, policies and procedures that Ms. Massey referred to, and how we can change those things to make the school environment one that works for everyone. Because in the end, that's what we're looking for. As we talked about all these disparities, it's very clear that what we're doing doesn't work. So if we're not looking for something to change, we're not looking to make it better, then, you know, just like Einstein said, the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting different results. So that's where we are. Yeah, yes. Yes. So we had a session that actually focused on implicit bias and talking about it, and I don't remember the times, but we had a full one-day training, and in that training there were 3 different sessions. And so we had 2 that were about an hour and a half in the morning, and then 1 session in the afternoon was 3 hours, and I think the implicit bias was one of the 1.5 hours. But part of what we did before that is we did an exercise where we logged on, and it was just it was a little, I don't know what it's, almost Pavlovian, I don't know. It literally, you look at, you start off by hitting a certain key, and it was like, and it just, white and good were on the left, and black and bad were on the, or dark and light, and it used many different things, but then it would switch them up. And so what it was doing is it was seeing if your brain was trained to automatically link those things together. So that was very interesting for a lot of our teachers to just initially say, is it, and it wasn't just with colors, it was also with, they did the same thing with Muslim and Christian and good and bad, and just to see if we had those implicit biases. So we started off with a self-assessment to kind of look at where we were individually, and then we talked about those things and talked about how those things are influenced in our lives. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Right, right, and I don't know that I can intelligently speak to that. I can tell you, as far as we go, I mean, our goal as educators every day is to provide education to every child, and it doesn't really matter to me. I understand what you're asking, and I don't. I'm not in the business of training people on politics. I try my best to steer clear of that. I'm in the business of educating kids, and I know exactly what you're saying. I watch the news and I see what happened in Morristown, and I know people. Then those children the next day had to come to school, or didn't come to school because of what they were dealing with, or the deportation. Yeah. Sure. Sure. And I guess the best answer I can give you is, and I can, again, only speak at my school. We didn't specifically, I don't recall talking about politics, no. Just being more, I think in general, the overarching purpose is again, to increase understanding. And I do think it was successful in that, because I can tell you, taking that situation, I feel like in my building, if teachers knew, or if a child came to them, or if a situation, and again, sometimes a child may have an angry interaction in a classroom, and so the immediate response to that is, they're removed from the classroom because they can't be a distraction to 30 other kids. However, following that is always a conversation. So whether they go to a principal, or whether they go to our restorative interventionist, or whoever they go to when they leave that classroom, we're going to have a conversation, and part of that conversation is going to be to get to the bottom of what's going on. And I think, again, the follow-up to that is then to go back to the teacher with that child and then have a conversation. And again, it's just to develop more and more understanding. So while we didn't get into necessarily the impact politics has on students in our building, I think deeper than that, regardless of what the factor is, whether it's politics or racism or whatever it is, what we dealt with was, how do we increase understanding?
and how, as you know, as educators, how do we be more understanding of every child that comes into our building and into our classroom every day, and try to deal with them one-on-one. Yes, ma'am. Well, I would say just like, there are lots of things that make people uncomfortable. And like I said a minute ago, if we don't change, if we don't do things differently, then we can't expect any different results. And with any kind of growth, there's growing pains. And so I think starting the conversations is the right thing to do, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But I think we have to get to a place where we can sit down as human beings and honestly talk with each other about the things that we see, and then find solutions to those things. Yes, sir.
I enjoyed your answers. It hits me also that sometimes what we're coming to understand is there may be a, say, Muslim holiday that was celebrated that day. The child comes to school. And so the child, and they've had a ceremony at home, which is really a happy time, and everybody's really happy. She's very excited to share that, and because she's excited or he's excited, he gets a little hyper and gets in trouble. So that wasn't anything that's fortunate that happened.
Sure.
It was actually a big plus thing. So
Sure.
that cultural competence, I think sometimes implicit bias has it looking at negative things that we might think are negative. They don't have to be. They can also be understanding the culture that a child comes from and
Right.
the good parts that come, but how it makes them different.
And I totally agree. And I think one of the things, again, going back to all of this, whether we're talking about restorative practices, PBIS, cultural competency, it all has to do with the mindset. And I think that's what we have to do. We all have to change our mindset and remember what we're here for, and know and understand, first of all, that all behavior, good or bad, it has something that causes it. Like there's a root cause, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. And so just, again, being more competent, being more aware of factors that may influence behavior in general, whether it's good or bad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So yes, he is wonderful. That's why I had him ask him here today. So we're going to highlight the next few topics, and I'm going to ask you to hold your questions because there's somebody in the back of the room that's going to hurt me if I don't try to get us back a little bit on track. So I won't mention any names, Jeannie Delaney. All right, so I'm going to talk just briefly about the Memorandum of Understanding, which is the agreement between us and law enforcement partners. We do plan, Chief Padusis and I have been working on that document, and we plan to have that on the July agenda is our plan, because we want to go into the new school year with a new Memorandum of Understanding, and we will be more information to come about that. We've shared that with we've gotten lots of feedback from our steering committee. There have been some other community stakeholders that have had an opportunity to review that, and we are very near where that will be available on our board agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about, for those of you who don't know, Jeffrey Wright is standing here, did a little wave, or sitting right there. He is the person who does a lot of the discipline policies. Let me back up on discipline policies. We do hope to have our discipline policies with a vote on June the 16th at our board meeting. It was on the May agenda, but there was a request to have another policy review meeting, and that is scheduled for this week at some point, Mr. Thomas. Yeah. Tomorrow at 2. Thank you, Ms. Bannister. Yes, tomorrow at 2. So the J191 is the policy that talks about what our discipline procedures will be in place, and it looks at that has the result of a year-long committee of faculty and staff and community stakeholders and parents who got together and look at our current practices, our current guidelines, and propose those to our principals. We got feedback from principals, we've gotten feedback from teachers, we've gotten feedback from the community, and the document that you see when you go to our website, if you look at that document that was posted on the website in May, is the culmination of all of that feedback. So anything that we've gotten feedback about, primarily from the people who are going to be interfacing with students on a daily basis, but also input that we've gotten from community as well. Now back now to restorative practices and PBIS. Jeffrey Wright leads the team that does all of the training for PBIS as well as our restorative practices. Our goal is to have all of our schools, again, the thing about this restorative practices, cultural competency, and positive behaviors, interventions, and supports is really, it is a network of supports that we're training staff and putting in place. They're not independent of one another. They really do have to blend and work together. And just like any other thing that you're going to continue doing well, our training will be ongoing, but we anticipate having all of our schools trained in at least phase 1, and then other schools will be moving, because we have schools that are in year 3, year 4, year 5 of the training cycle. But you can see up on the screen 2018-19 our remaining schools to be trained. Jeffrey's very busily getting those scheduled for PBIS. And then restorative practice training update, you can see that for 18-19 we have 8 elementary, 5 middle, and 3 high that we will be getting scheduled this summer. I want to make a comment about our reduction in suspensions in ISS and OSS overall. And when you look at the dramatic decrease that you see in from like 11,000 something to 4,000 something when you think about incidences of in-school suspension, one of the things that we will attribute that to is the training that Jeffrey and his team has done with our restorative interventionists, because we've stopped calling it in middle school. For reporting purposes to the state, it's still ISS, but we've called it a restorative classroom. So students are going there, they're doing their work in that classroom, but they also are participating in circles and participating in relationship building with our restorative interventionists, and that we have seen a decrease in the repeat behaviors of students who are coming over and over again, because that relationship is just not that one day in that restorative intervention classroom previously called ISS. That's an ongoing relationship where we're trying to help students think about and change their behavior and providing additional supports. So with that, our last, one of the other things that was a huge focus for us was our looking at our staffing and the diversity amongst our staff. And Miss Dr. Rosser is here. I'm about to call her by her previous name. Sorry, Dr. Rosser is here to talk to you about what kind of great things we have with recruitment from our Human Resources Department.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Brooke Denard Rosser. I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for coming out. I'm going to talk a little bit about my role specifically, as it was a result of the initial work of the DEO Commission, and kind of what I've been up to over the last year and 4 months exactly. So where we are, so background. So sometimes I find it's helpful to give people context. I often get the look or the question, where'd you come from? Where did they find you? So I am originally born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Professionally, my background prior to working for the district was in the consulting space, where I did a lot of strategic planning, change management, leadership development work, mostly with nonprofits, K-12 districts, and higher ed. So variety of different spaces and places, which I have found has really lent itself to me in this work, because I've seen how other districts do it, I've seen how other nonprofits do it, and I've also had the benefit of seeing how the next level up in higher ed does it as well. Roles and responsibilities. So my official title is Talent Acquisition and Retention Specialist. Say that 5 times fast. So essentially what that means is twofold. So one, obviously a big piece of my work is around identifying talent, attracting them to our district, securing them, and then working on that retention piece. So those are kind of some of the big priorities, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I work specifically in each of those areas, which is up next. So what we've done, so over the course of the last year that I've been in this role and in this position, here are a few things I decided I wanted to highlight for you guys. So one of the biggest things was exit interviews. So typically when a teacher or a staff member voluntarily leaves the district, there's generally some level of exit interview that takes place at the school level, but we hadn't been really strategic or intentional about how we were tracking that information at a district level. So one of the first things that I did was I built out an online exit interview questionnaire. And so 4 times a month, we send out an email survey to folks who have decided voluntarily to leave our district, and we just ask them some questions. Where were you located? How long were you with the district? Why did you leave? Are there factors that could have contributed to your decision to stay? And what that's offered us is really given us some insight around why it is we struggle to retain specific populations of our teachers, if there are things that we can change. Are there quick fixes? Are there easy fixes? Are there some bigger picture, longer term things? I also found that one of the most helpful things for me is to kind of know, who are we up against? You know, when they're leaving us, are you leaving because you're leaving the profession? Or are you leaving because you're leaving to go to a different district? And if so, which district is it? Why does that matter? Well, one, we want to know who our competition is, because we want to know, being the third largest district in the state, we've got a lot to offer. But a lot of times we may not be intentionally or being strategic about how we leverage some of those offerings. And so this data has been really helpful in helping us to develop and design some of the work around retention, because we have a better understanding of why we lose folks, and it's also kind of given us a baseline to look at moving forward. One of the other big things was a diversified and strategic recruitment strategy. So again, because my position did not previously exist, the work sits within our human resources department, and a variety of different folks kind of would just pick up the ball and run and do what they could. But by having a dedicated person to do this work, I've spent the last year kind of developing an overarching strategy for how we are being strategic and intentional about how we approach recruiting teachers specifically. So one of the things that I found, I started in February of last year, which for recruitment season is the middle of recruiting. So I started on a Monday, I was in Nashville by Wednesday. And I spent the next 3 months-ish kind of on the road, going to lots of colleges and universities that are in our region. One of the first things that I noted was that, one, lots of people didn't know where Knoxville was. And sometimes I was not out of state. So that to me was an issue. That to me was a problem. The other thing that I noted is that, let's be honest, I'm at colleges and universities, I'm recruiting millennials. And so one of the questions I got asked frequently was, what is there to do in Knoxville? What do people do on the weekends? What types of amenities do you offer? That wasn't something we'd been strategic or particularly intentional about selling. So one of the things that I definitely did was I revamped a lot of our materials and our collateral to better highlight what an amazing place to live and work it is. Doing so, and I'm hoping we'll be able to show our video that highlights some of that as well. But that was one of the first things, is that I noted it's not just about selling your district, because the reality is most districts are offering, generally speaking, around the same things. So it's, what does your community have to offer me? What does your city have to offer me? So integrating that into our strategy was important. And that was also kind of led to a lot of our targeted recruitment efforts, which also led to data. So again, kind of like the exit interview piece, that was very process oriented. So not super fun to build out, but amazing now that we have data that we can use to inform our decision making. Same thing was true as it related to our recruiting. So when I started, I was already registered for all these fairs, and so I just went where they said to go. But once recruitment season was over, I sat down and spent some time looking at the colleges and universities and said, I wonder why these are the ones that we go to. Have we always just gone to these universities, or is there data that supports these are the universities where we get teachers that stay the longest, or are teachers that are most effective? So what I began to do after that first recruitment fair, when I was trying to figure out what was going on, I built out a form and I started collecting data from every student that I saw or interacted with at every single recruitment fair. What that allowed me to do is, at the end of recruitment season, I knew exactly how many touches I had with students at different universities across the state and within the region. I knew the demographics, so I asked gender and race or ethnicity. But I also knew what their content areas of focus was. One of the things I learned very quickly is that high need instructional areas, your advanced math, your sciences, special ed, ELL, world languages, it's hard to find teachers in those areas. And one of the things that I noted was that we kept seeing elementary school teachers, more than I knew we would have availability for. So by beginning to track some of this information, it was helpful for me at the end of the season to say, when I build out my recruitment schedule for next year, where were the schools where I saw that had the most math teachers? Which schools or universities were putting out the most science teachers? Those are schools where I want to make sure I'm reaching out to during the off season. I want to get better acquainted with them, because I want to make sure that when those students start graduating, those professors and those faculty members are sending those students to us. So that's kind of some of the strategic kind of work that we've done around being intentional about our actual recruitment efforts. The last piece of this was around updating our branding and outreach. So one of the things that I could say as a person who applied for a job in our district is that I struggled to kind of navigate and find where all of the information was about salary schedules, benefits, the application process. So one of the things that I did was I built out a section on our HR website specifically focused on careers. And so that's if you're interested in moving to Knoxville, if you're interested in working for the district, if you're just interested in knowing what it's like to work for our district. All of that information is now in one space and in one place. The other nice thing is that it was also a place where I could upload our recruitment schedule for the season, and that meant that if I'm coming to your school, you knew I was coming. It was on the schedule. You could make sure you planned to stop by our table to say hello. So we updated that with a lot of information. It also now features our video, which I'll talk about too. What else? Social media. So our human resources department had an HR like Twitter account and I think a Facebook account, but we weren't really using it strategically. And the other challenge there is that with an HR department, you've kind of got twofold. So you've got the folks that already work for the district who are coming to you for information, but then you've got the folks that I'm looking at who are not in the district yet, but who I'm trying to attract in. So we kind of separated the two, and so I now manage, we have our own Twitter account and our own Instagram account, and I found that during recruitment season, those are super, super helpful. One, it's a great way to blast out information that hey, we're coming to your school, come by our table, here's where we'll be set up, I've got lots of cool goodies to give out. But it also gives me an opportunity to connect with students. So a lot of colleges and universities require freshmen and sophomore students who are enrolled in their EDD or in their education programs to come to these fairs. So while I can't recruit you to come teach in our district the very next year, when I come back to this fair next year, you're gonna remember me, I'm gonna remember you. You will have followed us on Twitter or Instagram for a year. We've stayed in touch, you know about some of the cool things that we're doing. And so it was kind of a relationship building piece that was very specific and strategically targeted towards our demographic, which is, in this instance, around this work, millennials. And then the last thing I did was I updated our marketing materials and our recruitment videos. So like I said, we were selling the district, but not necessarily selling the district where we are. And so we now have a 2-pager that we hand out at all of our recruitment fairs. First site really kind of highlights our community. It talks about Knoxville as a great place to live and a great place to work. And then the backside gives some kind of demographic information about our district. The last piece, which Prentice shouts out, was super helpful. So when you're on the road, I can tell people about how amazing it is to live here, but I found that it would be really beneficial and helpful if I could show them. So in the first 6 months, Prentice was gracious enough to run around our district with me for pretty significant amount of time and interview a lot of different principals, teachers, capture a bunch of footage that I could now take with me on my recruiting fairs, and it's a part of our setup. So when someone comes up to our table, we've got a video playing, it features our superintendent, it gives you a really nice high-level overview of what it's like to live, work, and play in Knoxville. That video is also now the very opening page on the careers website. So as soon as people get to that page, it's an immediate introduction to kind of who we are. As it relates specifically to targeting male educators and educators of color, they're pretty intentionally and explicitly highlighted in the film. You've got to showcase what you want to attract. People have to be able to see themselves in our district, and so we were very intentional and strategic about who we selected, how we selected them, and kind of how we integrated those folks into that video. So what are we doing now? So what's kind of on the horizon? So I just wrapped up spring 2018's recruitment season. As I mentioned before, we did revamp that schedule because now I had data to say, I know we've always gone to this university, but I literally saw 2 people. It's not worth the gas to drive 4.5 hours and get back and only see 2 people. So we were really intentional about that. Some key additions were we added some HBCUs where we have historically gone to a few, but we haven't really been strategic or intentional about developing a relationship with those universities. And so, it's pretty important because what I'm finding is that it's really those professors, those faculty advisors that are really driving and guiding those students in their careers. And so if we don't have a relationship with them, we're not really in a position to even be on their radars. So that was something that was really intentional that we did. The other big thing that we did is we rebanded our district-wide recruitment fair, which was quite the task, but I think it turned out really well. We had 457 attendees at this year's recruitment fair, which is exciting. I wish I could tell you previous numbers, but we weren't tracking it. So one of the things that I put in this year, which I think really helped as people were coming in, we did online registration. So in advance of coming to the recruitment fair, we had people go online, register, give us some information, one, so that we could better prepare in terms of staffing and making sure that it was going to be a smooth and seamless process for folks. But two, we also were able to implement on-site interviews at this year's recruitment fair, particularly and only in high-need instructional areas and for our priority and cusp schools. So those are schools that typically struggle in the recruiting season and process because they're competing against other schools in our district. And so, one, we wanted to try and give them a leg up on some of the competition, so we allowed them to do interviews at the recruitment fair, but also allowed our district level supervisors in math, science, ELL world languages, and special ed to do interviews on site. And so that helped us significantly increase the number of early contract offers that we submitted. And so that was definitely a plus. And then again, we're continuing to expand our partners. So EPP stands for Educator Preparation Programs, state terminology. Basically, it's colleges or universities that are training teachers. So we're continuing to expand our partnerships, continuing to kind of build some relationships, continuing to cast our net a little further out beyond just our local East Tennessee region, but into other states and further out across the state. I've talked a little bit already about filling in the gaps in kind of some of our high needs areas. The biggest piece there is really that now that we have a better sense and feel for which universities are putting out what, we've definitely been able to be more strategic. But that's not to say that we don't still have a high need for more teachers in the advanced maths and sciences, for more teachers who are in special ed, and for more teachers who are in the ELL and world language space. The other piece of that is also, again, primary focusing on additional male teachers. Cannot stress enough how important it is to have more male educators in our district, as well as educators of color. So again, that's definitely an uphill battle, but it's definitely something that I think in just a year we've seen significant strides on. And a lot of it's just been reaching out, building the relationship, putting a face with the district so that people feel connected to us. The last little piece I'll talk about is just around retention. Again, like I mentioned, big piece of that was just establishing the processes to gather data that would allow us to then use that data to inform our decision making. So having the exit interviews, gathering the recruitment data. I'm now also doing all of our placement registration for student teachers and interns, and so we're tracking that a little differently as well. So my hope is that, once their internships or student teaching experiences conclude, we'll be able to be more intentional about how we convert them into hires before they get a chance to look at other districts. So again, all of that is very data-focused, data-driven. We're also looking at some ways we can be more strategic and intentional about our onboarding. Research definitely shows that it's typically someone's initial interactions with a company or an organization that can dictate or predetermine their length of time that they're likely to spend there. This is particularly true for millennials. And so we're thinking more strategically about how, as a district, we're bringing people into our family as a district. We know our principals and our teachers on site at those schools do an amazing job, but as a district, is there more that we could be doing to be strategic and intentional about how we welcome people into our big family? And then the last thing is just continuing to work to identify and integrate PD that's designed to really provide additional support. Being a first-year teacher is hard, and that's whether you're at a high-needs school or a top-performing school. It's just a challenge, and so we want to make sure that we continue to provide our teachers as they come into the field with additional support, because that's long-term, that's what we hope will get them to stay. I think that's my last slide. Yes, and then this I thought would be helpful. This was just our recruitment schedule for this year. And so highlighted and italicized are the schools that are new for us and or that are historically black colleges and universities. North Carolina A&T should be highlighted and bolded as well. That's all I got. Thank you all.
So we will be happy at the end after we do our breakout groups. If anybody wants to stay and see the recruitment video, really is amazing. They did a great job, and we would love to share that with you. However, we do need some time because we are a little bit behind schedule to give you an opportunity to do your breakout groups so that we can get some feedback from you. So Jeannie Delaney, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that is what the exit interview process is tracking. So it's only sent out to people who have left the district. So there are, so there are a variety of reasons, and everyone's got a different reasons. A lot of times it's really simple. A lot of times it's a trailing spouse. You know, it's my husband got another job or my wife got another job in a different city and we're leaving. A lot of times it's educationally related. Sometimes people choose to go back to school and so they take a break. And a lot of times, depending on the college or university they've selected, it's out of state. We do ask the question on the survey, it's, are you leaving the field of education? And a lot of times, particularly with some of our younger teachers, they are leaving the field. So it's a career shift. So it's not, I'm leaving you, it's I'm leaving the entire industry and I'm going on to something else, which based on research isn't atypical, particularly with millennials. I think they say on average, millennials will have 8 careers in a lifespan. So that's not normal, but does it still end, you know, does the end result the same? Yes. Do people indicate that pay or things like that or benefits, things like that? Yes, they do indicate that those things are issues, and those are certainly things that's feedback that we certainly provide the district with. We go so far as to ask if they are leaving, if they are going to another district. Sometimes people will voluntarily share what district it is or what school it is, but we don't require them to ask that. And we do give everyone the opportunity as they complete that questionnaire to participate in an in-person survey. And so I've done, I think, 13 of those to date. And it's a lot of times people are more willing to be transparent and candid face-to-face in an informal kind of off-site campus or setting about their reasons for leaving. So we are tracking it, but again, we're only a year into tracking it. So in terms of seeing trends or patterns, we're not there yet, but we are tracking it.
We will. Since she hasn't lived in Knoxville for very long, aren't we really lucky to have Brooke here? Yeah. Yeah, everybody I work with is a rock star, and we're glad you found your way here. And the way she found her way is her husband is the football coach at Central High School. And I think our Fulton principal just left, so nothing against Fulton, but he happens to be at Central. So we're very happy you're here. So now it's time for us to hear from you all. And we know the best way to do that is to break you into smaller groups. You're going to be going to a classroom. You will have a facilitator and a scribe to take down all of your comments, questions, concerns. All of that will eventually be typed up, put on the website, but just as importantly, given to the steering committee and to the committee co-chairs to help guide their continued work. They're not quite halfway through their 5 years, so this was really important for them to begin to get a gauge. How are things going? So you're really just going to be answering 3 simple questions. Based on what you heard tonight, and your own experiences and observations in terms of the DEO initiatives, are things in general better? And if so, how or why? Are they about the same as a couple of years ago? How, why, or is anything worse? Need to know that too. All right, so we're going to break you into 2 groups. If you will look at your name tags, there should be a number on there. If you are number 1 through 15, you're going to be in group 1. And before, don't anybody move quite yet. Well, that was a principal, he can move. Your facilitator will be out in the lobby with a big sign to take you to your classroom. So you will be in group 1. If you are 16 or above, you'll be in group 2. So follow facilitator 2, and they will be in the lobby. We're going to give you about 30 minutes. Then we will come back and hear a little bit about what you all said. Everybody good? All right, see you in about 30. Let me just remind you, right before we start our reports, all of the information gathered tonight will be typed up on the website, given to the steering committee for their continued work. And if you didn't, but you want one, there are index cards around somewhere. If you have additional comments or questions, you can give them to me at the end or any of the staff. So, all right, I always love to get a volunteer to do, to report out. Which group would like to go first? Are you all the same group? Well, let's let them go first because they've got their papers. All right. You got their papers. Oh, come on up. We got to have a Vanna and a reporter.
All right, so we were in breakout 2, and we started off our side. Buy-in came up a lot, and I think I'm a teacher, and actually she is too. And I think one of the things from a teacher perspective is that we've got a lot of top-down implementation before people get buy-in. And I think people maybe that work in the business world understand this better. You have to change a culture over time. You have to figure out what your time scale is, and then you have to get buy-in from the bottom up. You can't do buy-in from the top down. And that's a lesson we've never really fully learned in education. So, the same disparities. Looking at the data, it looks like, looking at the data after a year of RTI implementation, the disparities don't seem to have decreased significantly statistically. That was the feeling of the group. I'm not saying that's true. Money's coming up a lot lately. The school boards, the opinion was expressed rather forcefully that the school board's role is to figure out the budget and then let the county commission figure out how to pay for it. And that was expressed 2 different ways by 2 different people. For example, if you need 50 teachers in a building, no, I'm sorry, that's something different. Better. Things are better in the sense that we've identified problems and we have statistical tools in place to evaluate those problems and put them out in front of people like we've been doing tonight. The restorative practices have led to fewer suspensions across the board, and that has been a gain. Restorative practices might be better implemented if we started, and again, this is the feeling of the group. Restorative practices might be better implemented if we started at the middle school and built it up, changing the culture 1 grade at a time. Revised discipline guidelines. I know from personal experience that the county has spent a lot of time getting teacher input and buy-in on the revised discipline guidelines to take effect next year. And better also strategic techniques for teacher improvement. Clearly there's a vision behind that. Worse, teachers need more support in restorative practices. And that phrase is kind of fraught with peril because if you ask most teachers, we actually don't want more training and support. We already get too much training and support. We need meaningful training and supports. And we get a lot of, and I'll go ahead and say this. I speak for myself, not for anybody else, but I'll just tell you for free. I get way too much irrelevant training and support. I really need more actual stuff I can do in a classroom. The way I like to put it is, you don't learn how to talk to kids by talking to adults about how to talk to kids. So, getting better. No, I'm sorry. Increase the need for full-time school psychologists. This also was argued very eloquently. I think, I'm not sure, but I believe there were 5 suicides at Farragut last year. I personally am connected to 3 kids that have attempted suicide this year at Bearden. And it is an epidemic, and it does cut across. And actually, another friend of mine I know for sure has actually had 2 suicide attempts as well. And it cuts across all socioeconomic barriers. So the need for fully trained, fully supported mental health experts is becoming increasingly stark. I think we already talked about suspension. So thank you very much. I know we're all tired. Appreciate you.
All right, good job. Group run, are you now ready?
I am. Okay. I was ready before 2 guys. No, actually, I'm just going to look at them from the ground because I think it's going to be easier for me. So I want to start with the positives. I want to start positive. And positive was, I can't find it, the ombudsman position has been really great to help bridge communication with parents and families to Knox County Schools, and Dr. Rassar, was that how I pronounced her name properly? Having a young woman of color in a position for HR recruiting is really vital, especially for East Tennessee. As a Latina who moved here from another state, I think that meant a lot for me to have her here today. We really echo a lot of the things that were spoken in the other group. I think the mental health issue is something we didn't discuss in this one, but it's been a big issue throughout every conversation. Some of the bigger things we wanted to ask was, we need to ask teachers, why are the suspensions in that data really down? Is it because, we discussed, is it because we're not suspending people because we shouldn't suspend them? So there was a conversation in the group about teachers saying, well, we're not allowed to suspend anymore. And then talking about what is it when you send them to the other classroom called? Restorative practices. So talking about restorative practices, what is actually happening in that restorative practice activity? Are we really supporting those children? Are we resolving conflict? Are we helping them grow emotionally? Or are we giving them busy work so that they don't distract a larger group, which is also valid? But is that really impacting their lives? So we also spoke about this really important matter of leadership needs to embrace cultural competency, and it goes back to what our other group was saying. It can't be imposed. Teachers and faculty need to understand why cultural competency is going to make their jobs easier and better, because it has to have benefit for them as well. If not, it's a lot of work that they don't see they're not seeing what's in it for them necessarily, not meaning that they don't care. But that was very important. And again, the level of training was very thin, and when people are in training, they don't have enough substitute teachers to support the classroom. So if we aren't training everyone across the board in cultural competency, it doesn't have the impact we want across the whole school district. Sorry. Not enough African American teachers in the schools, not enough Latino teachers in the schools. 0.6% of our population of teachers are Latino in Knox County. That's 23 teachers, and almost 10% of our students are Latino. That's over 5,000 students. We need a larger budget in our schools. We cannot continue to do what we're doing with this amount of students. And I hear it over and over at school board meetings where the public is saying, please, make a bigger budget. We need more money to support our children. So that was here as well. Apologize. Got a couple more important ones in here. One of the things that hasn't changed is there are still disparities, and it's a lot. 2 to 1 is high, and we're still concerned about that. And some of the other ones were some of the principals and administrative staff don't have 504 training. Students with ELL services that are not speaking English well enough, teachers can't identify they actually have learning disabilities, so they're just put in a bucket with ELL, and their needs are not being addressed. And again, I'm emphasizing this because it came back up in the group we were at. When I mentioned earlier about politics, I don't mean about a debate about politics, but if we don't understand, we study historically what happened in our country, and we talk about slavery, and we talk about bracero employees and farm workers. We also need to address what's happening today in our country and how that's affecting our children now. It's not just what's in the books, it's what's happening every single day. So that still needs to be included in cultural competency to better understand our students. So those and all the other ones the group had.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, reporters. First of all, Missy, is there anything you want to respond to that you heard? Okay, and again, this is all going to be typed up out there. Oh, okay.
I can talk really loud. Cultural competency, the entire school staff is being trained together. We're doing those on in-service days. It is on 100% of the school faculty.
Okay, good clarification. Let me thank our facilitators and scribes for their work tonight. That makes a little extra long day for them, but we appreciate what they did, and I think our co-chairs are going to close us out.
All right, appreciate that. So now I'm the man between you and your dinner, so I will not be stalling any. So again, just thank you for the feedback that you all gave. I'm glad you all was real. There's nothing wrong about being real. The Sandman will not come and take you away if you're real about stuff, and that's okay. And I'm thankful for that. And you know, we have a superintendent that's staying, right? And one of his priorities is addressing disparity. So we're all on the same page here. Hopefully, you know, next year, whatever stats we see will go down. But it's not going to just take us two, the staff here. It's going to take every single person in this room and people outside this room to make sure that you're not witnesses to this, you're participants. Your voice is very important. So continue the conversation as the summer goes on. So have a good school year. And I don't know if you want to, got anything, or I'm good? Okay, cool.
I just wanted to end with elections matter, right? We have elections coming up. A lot of the limitations that we find ourselves with are because of the mindsets and some of the limitations of vision of those who sit in positions of power. Challenge authority. Challenge the fact that you don't see the change you want to see moving as fast as you want to move it. It may not be comfortable for the superintendent at times, but he's a big boy. He'll be okay, I promise. He's a nice person, and I'm sure everyone here is a nice person, but sometimes we have to challenge the things that we find ourselves up against. We can do it with love, we can do it with compassion, but we have to do it. We have to move forward. So don't take this as just a moment, take this as a movement. So the next step is elect officials who will reflect the will of the people. And I want to leave you with that. Thank you.
That's it. Good night.